Hello, and welcome to Unity of Fredericksburg. My name is Judy, and I am pleased to welcome all of you to the Unity of Fredericksburg weekly online gathering. At Unity of Fredericksburg, we are advancing the movement of spiritual awakening and transformation through unity, a positive path for spiritual living. We thank those of you watching on YouTube, live or later, and invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you are able to attend live, we encourage you to join us in the Zoom community room for the full Sunday morning experience, including music, prayer, and connection. Our weekly newsletter includes the Sunday service link, and you can subscribe to receive that on our website at uofva.org. That is uofva.org. For everyone local to Central Virginia, Unity of Fredericksburg offers a variety of fun and enriching in-person gatherings every month. And again, you can subscribe to our weekly newsletter at uofva.org for all the details. Our message and meditation today comes from Reverend Kelly Isola. An ordained Unity minister, Kelly is a master at creating transformative retreats, rituals, ceremonies, and alternative services using music, storytelling, laughter, tears, and meditation as catalysts for spiritual transformation. She also facilitates board trainings and leadership development workshops and retreats. Kelly is sought after as a captivating, funny, inspiring, and charismatic speaker and teacher. Kelly partners with faith communities and nonprofit organizations to move through times of change efficiently, effectively, and with sustainable results. We are delighted to have Reverend Kelly as our speaker today. And now, here's Reverend Kelly.
Howdy, back again so fast. I feel like I was just here. I'm very excited. Um, Last week, was this isn't working like we think it is. And it was sort of starting to unpack, um, unexamined unconscious assumptions. So, and one of the things I mentioned, excuse me, was that some people, what's happened for us along the way, and you'll have to go back and listen, so this probably makes more sense, is that prayer for some people has really turned into a way to audit ourselves. And what I mean by that is, um, judging the conversation afterward, you know, um, and looking at what our prayer is, or looking at our spiritual conversations, um, the largely unconscious, unexamined assumption thing becomes we get exhausted. Spiritual people get exhausted. I know at times I am. I know there's many people around me that are just exhausted. And some of that comes from, the world we're in, and it can be a drain. But it's not only from life. We have, in Unity and in New Thought, there's some elements of like fix it spirituality, like using spirituality to, if we're using it correctly, then we can manage our life correctly, or we can monitor our thoughts, and we can correct emotions and analyze diagnosis, or make meaning of a diagnosis, or, being worthy enough, or spiritual enough, or deserving, relief, or and I'm not saying that everybody has these thoughts, or everybody goes down this road, but I've been out in the field for a long time, and I have no problem saying that there are many people that have this going on without even knowing it, because it's sort of happened over decades and decades. And today I just want to go deeper. Um, I want to take what we kind of, the conversation kind of started last week and go a little bit deeper because I don't think the problem is solely that we became hard on ourselves. I think somewhere along the way we changed the story. Like we changed the story entirely. Um, and what I mean by story is really unity story and um, what's taught and the language and the intentions and we don't and not even being aware of what's kind of going on, within ourselves. It's fascinating to me that unity is a faith that was founded on the idea of prayer and physical healing, and yet we have become masterful at actually being disconnected from the body. So when I say I think we changed the story almost entirely, that's what I have found. I've spent decades diving deep into Myrtle Fillmore. Now that there's a Myrtle Fillmore collection that's online at Unity Archives, that if you're brave and you want to go scroll through 18,000 plus documents, um, tread gently and slowly, because a lot of the letters, they're mostly letters, and in her handwriting. And I always joke about how she has this serial killer kind of handwriting. But she was a teacher, so her penmanship is very, precise. Not always, but anyway. So the story, I think that, and my title is "This is not the whole story," I think is something for us to remember so that in any conversation, especially in conflict, remembering that, wait, this is not the whole story. There's my piece, there's another person's, maybe there's three people, but it's not the whole story. And I want to, excuse me, I want to put that in the context of Myrtle Fillmore. As I said, I've spent decades, you know, before the Myrtle Fillmore collection was online, I would go into the archives at Unity Village. I just live about 5 minutes away, and I would go into the back. I'd pull boxes out of the back room and open the box, and on these giant tables, I'd put these letters, right, and just lay them out. And the beauty of it is I would pull out letters where I had the letter that somebody wrote in, and then I had the letter that she wrote back. So I would line up a bunch of letters, take my phone, click, 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 and then they're on my phone and bring them home and do, however I'm gonna. Some I've turned into, a voice recording. Others, you got to tag them so you can find them. But the thing about there's two books about Myrtle Fillmore. One is Myrtle Fillmore Healing Letters. The other one is How to Let God Help You. Myrtle Fillmore Healing Letters is just that. They're letters that Myrtle wrote to people. The challenge with it is that we don't have in that book, the letter that somebody wrote in is not in the book. So it's kind of like reading somebody's mail because you don't have what the person wrote, but you do have Myrtle's response, but it's not the whole story, right? And the same thing is true in How to Let God Help You. There are some that are just some teaching essays that Myrtle wrote, and there are also letters in there, but it's the same thing. It's just the letter that Myrtle wrote. We don't have the whole story. Um, so coming back to, panning out a little bit and coming back to Unity, we Myrtle kind of got lost. She died early in 1931. But her theology kind of got, for multiple reasons, kind of got lost a little bit. And Charles Fillmore, very systematic, very, focused on the mind. And when something is amiss, first place you go is to thoughts, and that was not Myrtle at all. Um, and creating the 12 powers and denials and affirmations and the creative process, he put things into systems, which there's nothing wrong with, but that has become Unity's, kind of the whole basket. So I want to bring Myrtle forward and make her alive, um, much more alive. So because we don't have the whole story. And even after all my digging around and what I've come to believe, it's not the whole story. That's one of those people, like, I wish she could just sit here and I could ask her a bunch of questions. But one of the things that Myrtle Fillmore said that many of us are familiar with. And when you're new to Unity, it's probably one of the first things you hear is when she was like us, a spiritual seeker, right? Just finding new ways of thinking and knowing that there was something else. Maybe couldn't put her finger on it, but you feel that. Some people call it divine discontent, but you feel there's something else there. So she's at a seminar by E.B. Weeks, and in that the inspiration comes to her, the words come to her that are, as a child of God, I do not inherit sickness. It's a powerful statement. As a child of God, I do not inherit sickness. But depending on how we hear them, um, they can either open our soul or have it be a burden. Because over the decades, that statement, as a child of God, I do not inherit sickness, has been sort of domesticated and has been turned into this affirmation, like a black and white kind of thing, as though if I were more spiritual, this wouldn't be happening. If I knew I was a child of God, I wouldn't have any sickness. And if I'm struggling, then there must be something wrong in my consciousness. And so, the other term also is one of the chapters in Healing Letters where she says there is no incurable disease. This is another one of those phrases that has become flattened, right, and kind of domesticated, and it's just there is no incurable disease, and neither statement do I believe Myrtle said or believed or used them in that fashion. If this, then that. So quietly, what happened over the decades is that something that was possibility became pressure. Like if I don't believe there's no incurable disease, or like I have to believe that there's no incurable disease, and if I don't, then there's a pressure in that. Like what's missing? And I don't necessarily mean it's this massive pressure, but there's this underlying pressure that well, this is a miss, or that's a miss, or you know, um, how do I believe that? Or wait, I do think I'm a child of God. So I don't think Myrtle was creating some kind of surveillance system, spiritual surveillance, that if you're a child of God, then you don't inherit sickness, and you should know that. But I don't think that's what she said. I don't think that's, I mean, maybe her words. I think what she was doing was she was resisting spiritual despair. When Myrtle spoke those words, she was in the middle of some vulnerability. When she went to that lecture on E.B. Weeks, she was kind of sickly. She just as a side note, she most likely did not have TB and therefore did not heal herself in 2 years. However, she had a lot of symptoms of things that today we would probably call irritable bowel syndrome. Like she always had digestive discomfort and, arthritis. She was a worrywart. To the end of her days, she was a worrywart. She worried, 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 and mostly about kids. She worried about being a mother and was I good at it? Now, that anxiety lessened over time. Migraine headaches. So I think there were a lot of physical symptoms she was walking around with that really don't make life very enjoyable. And those were the things that she, you know, was talking to her body about. But those words, as a child of God, I do not inherit sickness and no incurable disease, she was speaking those words in the middle of vulnerability, not above it, right? Not as this is a what is, but in the middle of it. She was speaking as someone or, that didn't have all the answers. Um, not as someone who had kind of conquered whatever challenge was in front of her. What she was doing, though, is she was speaking um, as a reminder, you know, to remember that I'm more than whatever this challenge is in front of me, and not willing to surrender her identity to fear. She didn't have any problem with anger or fear. She was a big fan of talk about your emotions, speak them, don't make them go away. They're there. Everything is there for you. So when she says, as a child of God, I do not inherit sickness, I don't think she meant, human vulnerability will never touch me because I'm a child of God. I think it's more likely she meant that sickness doesn't get the final authority over who I am, that my condition is not my identity. My struggle is not my deepest truth. She never says it's not there. She never says, well, you need to do some denials and affirmations. That's not what she teaches. But what she holds on to is that nothing happening to her can ever remove her belonging to life. That was a foundational belief for Myrtle, the belonging to life, right? And life, as in how Charles would, talk about one of the 12 powers. So when she says there's no incurable disease, it's not about offering a guarantee of outcome, but rather refusing hopelessness. Again, refusing, reducing yourself to this disease, refusing to let the fear tell the whole story. It doesn't mean make that part of the story go away. It's about bringing possibility back to the story, because possibility and certainty are not the same thing, not at all. So she brings possibility back. And I think our story, part of our story in Unity has gone too far into certainty, if this, then that. And Myrtle was a possibility person. And somewhere along the way, we've confused the two of them. And Myrtle's possibilities went into certainty. And then certainty becomes pressure. And then the hidden message becomes, if this did not heal, I did something wrong, or I didn't do it correctly, or I need to do it again, or I need a different denial and affirmation. And when I hear someone say, if this did not heal, I always wonder, well, whose time frame are you on? Like, whose yardstick are you using? Like, what does that mean it did not heal? Right? So there's a focus on an outcome, which is not Myrtle's focus. It's really not. What she's doing um, is she's reminding us this is not the whole story. Myrtle didn't say if this did not heal or this outcome wasn't something or another, then your thoughts or your actions, something needs to change. But that's not what she says. That's not what she teaches. What she said is that's what fear did with what Myrtle said. Right? Fear latches onto the outcomes. And again, let me just say, I'm not saying Charles Myrtle either or. There's definitely a both and in there. Um, because it's not that paying attention to our thoughts and what we're thinking and what we're doing, they're absolutely important. Myrtle's saying, but start over here, right? And I said this last week. If, you know, when we're dysregulated, right, in the middle of the challenge, the nervous system is disconnected from the body, it can't hear, the thinking going on. It can hear it, but it can't sort of tease it apart. So Myrtle's theology is, okay, let's regulate the body, then we can move into it's sort of like, decorating the house while it's burning down. That would can't go there first. Let's at first admit, okay, there's a fire and we need to, bring the fire down. So I think Myrtle was doing something far deeper than many of us realized. And I think she brings in a whole lot of the rest of the story. She wasn't just trying to change conditions, she was really protecting identity. Um, about not inheriting sickness, it doesn't mean I'll never experience illness. It means that illness doesn't get to define who I am. Doesn't mean to make it go away or that it's wrong or I did something wrong or it's bad or blah, 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 blah. Those are very two radically different spiritual universes to say I'll never experience illness and illness doesn't get to define who I am. Um, One creates pressure, the other creates dignity. One says, fix this, heal this, whatever time frame, I don't know, but fix this so you can feel worthy. So then you know you're enough. Um, Whereas the other says, nothing happening to you in your life can ever remove your belonging to life. That's the rest of the story. And that's a very, very different kind of healing. But it's not one that we're familiar with. It's not one that has gotten talked about. But just remember, it's not the whole story, what you've been taught. And don't get rid of what you've been taught, right? It's just not the whole story. There's another word in unity that I think we've often misunderstood. Um, um, and that's harmony, the word harmony. I think people hear it, or what I've noticed is, and myself as well in the past, that, well, if it's harmony, the great harmonizer, then it's supposed to be smooth and conflict-free and um, calm, emotionally calm, right? No discomfort, no ripples, meaning nothing difficult is happening. And I would say that's not actually harmony. And the reason I say that is because music teaches me that. Harmony is not sameness. Harmony is different notes, learning how to exist together without destroying each other. So a symphony does contain tension, it does contain movement, it does contain, depending on the song, or the music you're listening to, it can contain ache or uncertainty. There's crescendos, right? And, it gets louder and it gets softer. And there's release and there's, the pausing where that anticipation, you're waiting for the next movement. So harmony is not eliminating any complexity, but Myrtle would invite us into the relationship that we're having with the complexity. I believe that's what she understood. That's, you know, this is not the whole story. There's more of the story. Because her spirituality is not how do I eliminate discomfort? It's really how do I stay in relationship with myself and with life because I belong to life. How do I relate? How do I remain in relationship with me, my body, while the discomfort is here? That is harmony. It's not perfection. It's not control. It's not spiritual performance. It's relationship. That's the big thing. That's the kind of this is not the whole story. So a huge piece of that, the rest of the story is relationship. Myrtle was very relationship, very relationship. She said, I stopped speaking words of condemnation to my body, and immediately a great relaxation took place. That's the regulating thing, right? If I'm speaking words of condemnation to my body, that's dysregulation. And I think I'm very subtle at that. I've gotten a whole lot better. I used to speak words of condemnation that were very easy to, you could tell, hey, Kelly, like, don't talk about yourself that way. Things about my weight or how I looked or being short or, whatever. But then it got more and more subtle, right? Like maybe something, if I'm getting up in the morning or if I'm sitting on the floor and then getting up to a standing position, I'll make a joke about how I need a crane. Those are technically words of condemnation. I know there's a chuckle in there. Um, and once I stopped saying even those that are very, that's the thing about words of condemnation. They can, like a virus, they can evolve and change and get very insidious. Um, Many of us live under an internal condemnation, very subtle, unconscious, I believe. So it's a constant correction, it's a constant pressure, a constant fixing. And Myrtle notices something incredibly profound. It's that our healing, our place of rest is in relaxation. Relaxation. She says one statement of hers I enjoy is, I blessed my body and called it good. And that could be the whole sermon. I blessed my body and called it good. I don't know how many of us bless the body. And good does not mean perfect. Good does not mean perfect. It's not something to negotiate with. It's not something to correct. Myrtle refused to make the body an enemy and knew that that was the starting place, that the body is not a problem to solve, something to transcend. I need to transcend my human experience. No, you don't. You need to be in relationship with it. You need to care for it. You need to belong with it so that the body is not a problem to solve, but a relationship to care, to tend to. But somewhere along the way, our spirituality became transactional, right? Correct the thoughts. What are the thoughts that are going on? And then get your desired outcomes. But life is much more mysterious. And the interesting thing is that that's not entirely untrue. But when that's becomes the story, we need the whole story. Because life is, as you know, is much more mysterious. Good people get sick, conscious people struggle, faithful people die. Life happens. And if our spirituality cannot hold all of that, they're going to disappear in shame, which I know goes on in many unity churches. Um, Afraid to say that, well, I've been practicing this and I'm not getting this, this kind of outcome. I know, because I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of people, that there's an element of shame that unfortunately got built into over the decades into the teachings. So I want the whole story, and I want people to know that it's not the whole story. What maybe what we've been taught and what we practice is not the whole story. And I'm not saying stop doing that, but rather notice, ask a few questions. I am never, ever, ever, till the day I die, going to ask anyone, what are you manifesting? What are you demonstrating? The outcome thing is a demonstration and manifestation and proof and law. That's Charles Fillmore theology. I want to bring Myrtle into the front. So I'm not going to ask you, what are you manifesting? But I might ask you, have you confused outcomes with worth? Do the outcomes, desiring that I might be, quote unquote, working towards, have I confused those or think that those are, again, unconsciously think that they're something about my worth? Where have I mistaken pressure for faith? Where have I abandoned myself trying to become spiritually acceptable or doing the spiritual growth thing the right way? And where might my life be inviting me not into perfection, but into relationship? Because I know that healing is not always the elimination of symptoms. It's not. Could be, but it's not always. I think we enjoy that when it is the elimination of symptoms, especially if the symptoms are painful and distracting and slow us down and maybe give me time that shift away from doing what I enjoy. But sometimes healing is just staying connected to yourself. while life is still unfinished. Don't go to the thoughts. They don't matter at the moment. Maybe harmony is not the absence of waves, or discomfort, but learning not to abandon yourself while the waves move through, right? It's not the whole story. So I think Myrtle's deepest wisdom, as she points to this is not the whole story, is that her deepest wisdom was never about controlling anything or desired outcomes or demonstration or do this, then that, right? It was never about that. It was more about stay in relationship with life long enough to discover that you are never separate from it to begin with. So I'm going to say that again. And I know that people hear that and say, well, I do believe that. And what I'm talking about, okay, belief here, where do you feel it in your body? Where do you feel yourself staying in relationship with life long enough and discovering that you are never separate from it to begin with? That's what Myrtle means when she invites us to just stay, that everything is welcome to the space. It's all belongs as our life. It's not the whole story, but we stay with it until we have the experience, not the thoughts, but really feel the experience that we were never separate from it to begin with. That makes more of a whole story. Because what we have right now is not the whole story. And I so want anyone that I talk to, anyone here, to know that you're already loved and you already belong. That is, you are held in that, all of you, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You are already loved and you already belong. So let's take that into meditation. If you're comfortable, you can close your outer eyes or maybe just lower your gaze. I often lower my gaze onto a candle, which is what I'm doing right now. Take slow breaths. Just follow the rhythm of your breath. Drop the shoulders, maybe sink into the chair or whatever you're sitting on. And gently, with every breath, allow your body to arrive. Feel the feet arrive as you place them flat on the ground. Or maybe you're sitting cross-legged. Just allow whatever the parts of your body that you're tending to, allow them to just arrive. No thinking about it, just arrive. Not the version of monitoring yourself, not the version of you trying to become spiritual enough. Just you. Breathing, existing here. Notice any places inside of you that maybe have become tight with effort. I know I have a place in my right hip at the moment that's just sort of become tight. So I kind of wiggle a little bit. Maybe it's a place that's still trying to earn peace. It's trying to earn rest, trying to earn worthiness. So for a moment, without fixing anything, just notice. And when I stop arguing with myself, when I stop arguing with my hip because it thinks it needs to earn worthiness, doesn't mean my hip, but that's where the feeling of needing to be worthy shows up. That's where that tension, that discomfort. So take another breath and feel the chair beneath you. Feel it supporting your whole body. It is supporting all of you. And notice that that is life that is holding you right now. No perfection, no fixing, no growth, no nothing. Just being held. Being held with gentle attention to your body. Remembering it is not a problem to solve. It's not an obstacle. There is no failure in it. There's not even evidence of failure. But your body is a living relationship. It's a companion. It carries your wisdom. Your body carries your history, your hope, your fatigue, your life. Take another deep breath. Silently say to your body, thank you for carrying me. Thank you for staying. If there's tension, let it be there without shame. If there's uncertainty, let it be there without spiritual pressure. Remembering that harmony means staying in relationship while the waves move through. Staying in relationship with you. Staying in relationship with life, capital L. Now gently hear these words from Myrtle again. I blessed my body and called it good. I blessed my body and called it good. So together we simply practice staying with that, staying present, staying compassionate, staying connected. And that, perhaps, all by itself is what is most holy. I blessed my body and called it good. Good does not mean perfection. The root of the word good actually means to fit together, to belong together. So I blessed my body and called it good. And so it is. Amen.
Well, thank you, Reverend Kelly. That was amazing. Thanks for watching the weekly broadcast from Unity of Fredericksburg. Visit our website, uofva.org, to learn more about our mission of spiritual awakening and transformation, and support our ministry with your financial donation. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time.